So I kind of ran across this article on Aeon. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's AEON. AEON.co is the website. They publish articles on philosophy and related topics. So there's an article there called Beyond Authenticity. The subtitle is In her final unfinished work, Hannah Arendt mounted an incisive critique of the idea that we are in search of our true selves. The author is Samantha Rose Hill. She's part of the faculty at the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Very well written and really insightful article. It helped me understand this whole thing. Right, so thank you for the article. Let's get into it. So if you look here, I just want to point out a couple things. So one thing that I've always thought about this, and I've noticed it in myself, when I was in my early 20s. And I also notice it now in a lot of people, a lot of young people, a lot of other people. I notice, I listen to people when they talk about, oh, you got to find your authentic self, you got to be yourself. And I listen to what they talk about, the way they talk about, the context and this stuff. And I wonder, I always get the sense that what they're really trying to do is get rid of the boredom of everyday life. It's like I hear complaints about how boring life is, how routine, like escape the routine boredom of your life, like it's an evil thing, you know. I think it's one thing that this young generation, every generation has its problems, okay? But this young generation, this new generation coming up, I think one thing they have a hard time with, they think that everything's supposed to be fun and dramatic, and most of life is not like that. But this pain of boredom, and that's real, like there is a pain of boredom. It is real, but it's not evil. It's actually very beneficial, But at the end of the day, it's just boredom. You're not dying. Yeah. It's not like there was a tragedy in your life, okay? So there's that. The second thing is that I feel like, and this has been true for a long time, this is not part of this new generation, but even in my generation, people were very keen on being special. So they tried to find meaning in their life, not by creating something of value. They tried to find meaning in their life by being unique and special. And you can find meaning and purpose in your life without being unique and special. It is, especially for creative people, which, I'm one of those, it is important for us to be original and unique and creative and do new things, right? That's part of what makes us feel alive. But as it pertains to finding your true self, right, I don't think this is really a part of this. So if you look here at this article, she's talking about Heidegger, and she starts with Heidegger and then how Arendt kind of, so Heidegger, Jasper, and then Arendt, the way she kind of argues against what they were saying. But there is a history to this thought. So she starts with that. It's really insightful. And there's the German word for everydayness is, I can't pronounce it, which means commonplace, ordinary, and banality, right? It's that banality that people hate, right? Gives one the sense of recurrence and routine. People hate that, right? Repetitious and often boring reality, okay? And so in response to this, Heidegger, look at the bottom here, Heidegger develop the concept of authenticity against this everydayness in order to try and capture a full portrait of the self. So there's this everydayness where you're just part of the machine, like a cog in a machine, but then you go home and you're reading or listening to music and you're journaling, and then that's your real self, right? And that's your real authentic self, not the fake self of outside. And I think this is the foundation of what most people think about in terms of your authentic self, okay? There are a lot of problems with this, so let's get into that. So if you look at this, if we continue on, right? There's Heidegger, and then there's, she talks about Jaspers, and then the existentialists. Hannah Arendt, she's a German philosopher, but she was very much aware of what was going on in France with the existentialists, and then obviously with the German philosophers. And the existentialists at the time, they took a very different view about this. I learned a lot about what responsibility really means from Sartre's work. Right? Sartre has a very interesting view, and so if we summed it up, it'd be something like this: the credo underpinning Sartre's work, existence precedes essence. Okay, so your existence comes first, and then, whatever you want to call essence. But so that meant that we are thrown into the world without any fixed substance, and this meant that we get to choose who we become. So think about it this way. If you really do have an authentic self that you're born with, and you have to find it and discover it, yeah, that sounds cool, but it's also very damning in a way. It's very limiting, right? Because what if your authentic self is an evil, narcissistic asshole who just wants to hurt people? That's your true self. Go find your true self and ruin a lot of people's lives. Or what if your true authentic self is to be a janitor for a big corporate company? These are ridiculous examples, but there are many ways you can think about this. The insight here with Sartre is that we don't have this authentic self. There's nothing there. And because of that, we have freedom, right? Which is a really cool concept. I think that's the positive way to look at this. For Sartre, there is no human nature. We must always be imagining and reimagining who we are, which is to say we are always in the process of becoming, right? You're always becoming something. I think for most people, they are getting worse and worse, becoming worse and worse. But whatever the case, you're always in that process of becoming. For Beauvoir, she took a very interesting way, and man, I hated reading her in college. But I really appreciate her now because she really took a lot of the existential concepts and applied it to the artist's life. And so this is one way that I have become a different person, is to explore my creativity more. And for Beauvoir, becoming was a creative enterprise, a work of art, right? And I think that's another really cool way to look at this. Instead of thinking I need to find my authentic self. Hey, I'm free, and I get to do this creative work of making myself, So to summarize, for the French existentialists, it was not about uncovering a pre-existing true self, but rather choosing to engage in a process of becoming, right? And that was kind of Sartre's thing. This is the ultimate responsibility that you have, is to commit and engage in this process of becoming, embrace your freedom, and embrace the fact that you exist, right? But what does that mean? It means that you are in this process of becoming. Yeah. So if we look at image number 3, here. So Hannah Arendt, caught between German and French existentialism, she came up with her own take. In place of authenticity, Arendt turned to the concept of will in order to think about how one decides to act in the world. Okay, very different, very strange. Just hear me out and bear with me. This is going to make a lot of sense. The way I picture Hannah Arendt, from what I've read of her and I've read about her, is that she was a genius who lost her dad when she was young. She finished reading Kant by the age of 14, 15. So he's obviously very smart and very hardworking. I've read Kant multiple times and it took me forever to understand what he was talking about. And he writes tomes. So you have to be smart and you have to be very hardworking to get through Kant. And if you can do it by 14, then there's something very special about you. But my whole point was losing her dad and, reading Kant and living during that time. I think she understood something about how suffering was essential to a good life. I don't think her life was comfortable, and so she couldn't fall back to anything. So she had to look forward, and I think she had to, I could be totally wrong, but this is how I kind of picture her all the time. And I love how she reframes this discussion about authenticity to the will, okay? Initially, I think the best way to think about it is that I think that when Arendt looked at it, she was like, there's nothing to talk about. There's nothing there. So let's talk about something we can talk about and actually make some progress and understand, and that's the will, okay? The other thing I really like about this is I feel like Arendt is calling Heidegger's bullshit on his concept of authenticity, right? He's kind of thwarting Heidegger's attempt to fantasize about how you could find yourself by simply looking inward and saying, that's ridiculous. Without saying that's ridiculous, she's like, authenticity, I don't think, and that's a dead horse. Let's not even like, why are you even talking about that, you idiot? You child. I just feel like she studied it and then she was like, that doesn't jive at all with what I experienced in my young life. And I think it takes way more work than just simply going home and starting to journal. So if we look at the rest of the article here, so Arendt turned Heidegger on his head and argued that all thinking moves from experience in the world, not from being. So thinking comes from being in the world, right? And this is the kind of the precursor to, I think the precursor to a lot of the philosophy, the foundations for the philosophy of science, right? Ideas don't come from within our head, which are abstract ideas. They come from being in the world and experiencing the world, having relationships and trying things and doing stuff, real stuff in the physical world, right? Okay, so Heidegger had tried to divorce thinking from the will in order to argue that it was one's true inner being, the authentic self, that determined ultimately who you became. But Arendt felt that this was an abdication of personal responsibility and choice. Yes, right, exactly. It was a way of handing over one's decision-making power, right? And I think that's the Sartre influence probably, or the existentialist. But I think, it's her spin on it because she's saying like, it's not a discussion about authenticity. Let's talk about what this really is. And this is the will, okay? So what exactly is the will?